Hi everybody, my name is Janet Myatt. I'm a spiritual counselor, teacher, healer, and author, and you can find out more about me at my website, janetmyatt.com. The topic of our conversation today is there has to be a better way. So let's get right to it. The other day I was speaking with a good friend of mine who has been studying the Course in Miracles for a really long time. And we were talking about the political situation, and I was saying how I was excited that Marianne Williamson was considering running for president. I was kind of surprised. I thought, wow, that's a brave thing to do in today's climate. And my friend said to me, oh, you can't fix the world. And I laughed because how many times have I said this? You can't fix the world. You can't fix others. You can't fix the world. You can only work on yourself. And we can't even fix ourselves as they stand. We actually have to transform ourselves. And that's quite a different process than fixing. And so the same principle applies for the world. And I agree. We can't fix the world. But we do need to transform the world. And I think we have a responsibility to transform the world. And I have this great hope. I don't know Marianne Williamson personally. I've never met her. I haven't spoken with her. But I do know that she's been a long-time student of the Course in Miracles, which is a transformational course. It's about doing this work of changing our perception of ourselves and how we fit into this larger oneness that we have our beingness within, that we live within. And so to have somebody who has gone through that process and continues to go through that process, that's a daily process, an ongoing process, to have someone like that offering to stand before us and get a discussion going on kind of the state of our nation, the state of our world, and perhaps inviting a change, inviting us to get into a discussion about how we can transform the world. And rather than having arguments about how we can or cannot fix it. And so that's my great hope. And I want to talk a little bit about the difference between this sort of idea of fixing and this other invitation to transform. Right now, the way our world works is it's insane. It doesn't add up to wellness. And I don't think there's a whole lot of dispute about that. We look around and there's haves and there's have-nots. There's pollution. There's weather change. And there's war. We have racial tensions rising again in this country and in other places around the world. And I think it's a pretty safe bet to say that most of us would agree that the world isn't functioning well. And it's certainly not a happy, harmonious, peaceful place to live. It's a rather insane world. And one of the things that became clear to me in my own awakening process is really coming face to face with a hard truth. I remember sitting in my car in the midst of dealing with a crisis that involved some other people, and it became very clear to me I can't expect an insane world to be sane. Insane is as insane does. Kind of remind me of Forrest Gump, Of course, an insane world is going to behave insanely. So my next question was, well, then where does that leave me? And the answer that came to me was, I can only choose sanity. And that's going to require learning. That's going to require changing my mind. That's going to require learning how to think differently, how to perceive differently, and consequently from there, how to interact differently. And I became entirely willing in that moment. I mean, I'd already had a lot of willingness in my life. I'll be honest, I'd been on a spiritual path pretty much my whole life. So, but this was a huge turning point for me to really recognize the insanity of the world and to stop pointing fingers, you know, and stop trying to create a sense of sanity in my own space by assigning insanity to others. You know, well, I don't act like that, so, you know, I'm the good guy. I'm the insane person. I don't have that happening to me, so I must be okay. So purchasing innocence at the expense of others, it became really, really clear to me that that's an absolutely insane notion. And I like to use analogies that we can relate to. And as with all analogies, we have to take it with a bit of a grain of salt, but it does apply. That'd be like looking at your body, and we understand our bodies as to be a working wholeness, right? It's actually comprised of billions of lives, it's got billions of parts, all working synchronistically together to create this living, breathing, sentient wholeness that we call the body. And in order for the body to be well, all of the parts have to be well. And not only do all of the parts have to be well, they can only be well if they're working together for the overall wellness of the larger whole. So, you know, this idea of, well, this cell is healthy, even though it's becoming healthy at the expense, or thriving, shall we say, at the expense of cells around it, we know that doesn't add up to wellness. That's what cancer is. You know, that's a cell that's gone rogue. Says, you know, I'm going to pull the resources, you know, into my reproductive system, and I'm going to grow like crazy. You know, my blueprint at the expense not only of the you know, the lives around me, the cells around me, but at the expense of the overall body. It actually ends up, you know, killing the body if left untreated. And that is really how this notion of purchasing safety at the expense of it being unsafe for others, purchasing worth at the expense of assigning worthlessness to others, assigning value to myself at the expense of, you know, creating a value less someone else. It just became very clear to me that's absolutely crazy, because I live in a greater wholeness. I am not a separate unit, actually. I'm a part of a larger interconnected field of life. We are in one system. We're actually one humanity. We're one world. And this one world is actually part of a larger solar system, which is part of a larger universe. And anything that believes it's benefiting while at the same time benefiting at the expense of another part in the wholeness is not actually benefiting, not only not benefiting the whole, but ultimately not even benefiting that part that thinks, that's deluded into thinking that it's benefiting, because it can't escape the reality of the fact that it is a part of a larger whole. It can deny it. He can pretend, because la 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 la, you know, I'm not going to pay attention to that. But at the end of the day, we can't change the reality of that we are one world, we're one humanity. And I think if we can stop arguing about policy and politics and parties and religion and all these things at the belief level, which percolate up out of, these are all effects that have come out of our underlying belief system. And if we, as a country, can start to get curious again about these foundational beliefs and begin to connect the dots in our own mind and say, you know, this thinking is inherently unsound. in the long run. We have history to prove this to us, you know. And if we can't just keep putting the earmuffs on, the blinders on, and say la 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 la, I'm going to stick to what I believe because it's what I know. Because if we do that, we will just continue to get the same results. We'll continue to get people pulling apart, fighting, some winners, some losers. And again, there's no such thing as a winner if there's a loser. And until we get that, we're going to continue to suffer as individuals, as groups, as nations, and as a world. There's no such thing as a winner if the winner is a winner because there's a loser, okay? And if we can start to really come together as a country and start to think about the interconnectivity of all of us and let go of all of our preconceived notions, every single fix that we've come up with for this country has not actually been a fix. It's been a temporary stopgap where some people say yes and a bunch of other people are saying no. We haven't solved any of our problems. We've actually grown them. So let's start looking at that. Let's start talking about that. Let's start getting curious about that. And I want to tell you a little story. I happen to know a woman who was around when the Course in Miracles was first written, and she shared some stories with me about how the book came to be. And again, what's important about the story is the process. So here are these two people: the person who scribed the book, Helen Schuckman, and a person that she worked with. And they had a very contentious relationship, like most of us. There's contention. It was just a very difficult relationship, and with her boss. And one day he threw his hands up and he said, "There has to be a better way. There just has to be a better way than this." And Helen was struck by that, evidently, and said, "Okay, I'm going to help you find that better way." And from that experience, the Course in Miracles began to be revealed to her, and she began to write it down. What's important about this is that in that moment, these two individuals recognized two things. This relationship isn't working. I don't want this anymore. And I want it to be harmonious and easier. So that's the direction I want to go in. But I don't know how. My information, my current information, creates this. So the things that I believe in, the things that are important to me, my inner, what I call the inner lawyer, that inner justification for all of our behaviors and thoughts, it leads to this. It leads to this difficult relationship. And I'm pretty clear I don't want that anymore. I want a better way. And I admit, I don't know how to achieve that. That is the moment then that the door opened for change, for real transformational change. And a willingness to not only open that door, but keep it open and do the work. Do the work. So there's this level of intelligence, and I guess you'll just have to trust me on it for now if you haven't had this experience. There's a level of intelligence within all of us human beings that doesn't sit in our problems, doesn't sit in our stories, it doesn't sit in our suffering. It sits outside of it, and it's from whence we came, okay, source. And you can call it any name you want. Words are labels, but it's this unified and unifying consciousness. And that when we seek it out, it teaches us, it brings us, it heals us, it moves us, it creates transformation. Now, many people call it intuition. So let's stick with that word. That's sort of a neutral enough word. A higher intuition, a pure reason, this epiphany, where we are able to get out of our repeating patterns of limitation long enough, nanoseconds at a time, to start to see, gain perspective on what's happening, and then find our way out, find that next step, begin to have a larger context for our experience, and then to start to create meaningful shifts. So one of the things A Course in Miracles teaches is that once we set our purpose, the means is always provided. So means and purpose are joined at the hip, and once we know what our purpose is, then the means for that, it unfolds. So if our purpose is to win at any expense, to dominate, to take what's ours, to subdue those people and get what's mine, if that's our purpose, then we will continue to develop means that support that thinking, and we will continue to create an unwell whole, larger whole. We'll continue to have too many resources in one area and not enough in another. So using the body as an analogy, that's like trying to make your lungs really healthy at the expense of the heart. It doesn't make sense, right? Both of those parts are part of a larger whole. Both parts are necessary to the wholeness. So when we can get curious about, there has to be a better way. I bet you most people in our country would really love to know what a better way might be. There's just a lot of fear. There's a lot of attachment to our current ideas of what better is and how to get it. And people become very afraid of letting go of their beliefs, because one of our problems is we're over-identified with our beliefs, we're over-identified with our thoughts, current thoughts, and we're over-identified with this idea of being separate individuals with our own ideas and our own thoughts, and I need to take care of myself and get what's mine and get what's good for my family or my tribe or my group at the expense of others. If we can start to, again, zoom out and see that doesn't really benefit us in the long run, then we can start to get curious about what is this better way, and start to let go of holding on so tight to past approaches that have not made the world a better place, but have instead just kept us on the hamster wheel of it being better for some and worse for others. And now it's better for these some over here, but worse for others over here. If we can get curious and go through this process of digging more deeply down into our shared values, I think most of us want to prosper individually. We want our families to prosper. And if we can start to understand that we and our families and our tribe can't prosper unless the whole is prospering, unless the soil that we are rooting into is healthy, and that's this common good, this oneness. I think right now the greatest obstacle we face is the fact that it's difficult for us to admit that we don't know a better way. And so we stick to what we think we know and keep repeating these same patterns of competition, scarcity, war, and so forth. But as I said earlier, step one in creating any kind of meaningful transformation or transcendence is, first of all, coming to a recognition, this isn't working. Our world isn't working right now. Our government, our system is not working right now. Step one. Step two, there must be a better way. But I don't know what that better way is. And then sitting with that knowledge for a moment and facing the fact that we don't know, and instead of just immediately scrambling up to, moving up into problem solving, admit we're not ready to go into problem solving yet, because we need to tap this higher intelligence system within us, this aspect of intelligence that is sitting outside of our problems. And it exists in all of us. So step 3, acknowledging there's something available in my mind that's beyond my current misunderstanding. And most of us, if we think about it, and can remember instances in our lives when we have had a breakthrough, we've been facing a problem, we've been facing an issue, or we have a sudden need to create or move in a new direction, and we literally bring in of a piece a new perspective or a new way to go. So I think most of us, if we sit long enough, can recognize that this higher intelligence does exist within us. We do have a relationship with it. It's just mostly unconscious. And if it exists in me, it exists in you. And so kind of part of this step is acknowledging that it has to exist in all of us, and we can start to trust that. And then the next step is to really get engaged in learning to distinguish and recognize this higher intuition, and be willing then to kind of be an open book in our mind, and to be willing to take instruction and to act on that instruction. And I think that requires for us collectively a willingness to come together and talk and share and work collaboratively and co-creatively. When we recognize, when we really come face to face with a spiritual principle, that the external world is an outward projection of an inward state of mind. And that's true for us individually, and it's true for us collectively. So if this external environment, this external world is chaotic and not working, we have to be willing to acknowledge that our internal world is chaotic and dysfunctional. Because that gives us power then, because we can do something about that in our own internal landscape. And if we can change our inner landscape, our interior being, the way we think about ourselves and others, then what we manifest out in the world will automatically change. Then things like policy and programs and plans can come up out of that healthier soil. Then we can start to create meaningful change. So I'm not too interested in talking policy right now with others here in the United States, because I don't think we're ready to talk about policy or programs or fixes. I think we have to do our homework. We have to show up as human beings and come together in council, in a circle. And we need to start really looking at our values, and are those values good for the whole? Because we are a whole. We are one people, we are one world. And if we can start to dissolve these boundaries and these biases and these prejudices, I know we can find a better way, and we can build it. So I personally am excited that someone like Marianne Williamson is thinking about throwing her hat into the ring, because I think she is someone who can at least ask these types of questions and perhaps get us involved in these discussions. And I'm hoping that that's what she'll do. I watched an interview with her where she said, she's not willing to win at any expense, at the expense of these deeper values and these deeper understandings. And she's not potentially running against anybody. She's wanting to step up in front of us as a smart person with a lot of experience around transformation, and get us talking and invite other smart people to come up and help lead us through these conversations, and trust that we as a people can figure out and can be led by these higher levels, this shared higher level of consciousness, we can be led into a better way of coming together as a nation and as a world. So thank you for your time. I'd love to hear from you. I hope that you will comment. I hope that we can have a conversation. So if you're watching this on my YouTube channel, I'd love for you to leave a comment. If you're watching it on my website, you can leave a comment there, or get onto social media and connect with me on Facebook. But I would love for us to start this process of dialoguing, and I hope that you'll start to dialogue with your family and your community. How can we discover a better way of being a United States? And how can we as the United States discover a better way of being a part of the larger world that we are an integral part of? All right, thanks so much for your time.